He always said he loved them. Then the knife dropped. Twice. That's where this story begins. Not in the quiet, sprawling comfort of a Brentwood estate. Not in the worn leather of Rob Reiner's favorite chair. Not even in the laughter echoing through Michelle's private art studio. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. No, it begins with a sound. The kind you don't expect in a house like that. It wasn't the crash of forced entry. It wasn't the sound of raised voices echoing down polished hallways. It was the sound of something irreversible, quick, final, and, depending on who you ask, maybe even planned. And yet, no glass was shattered. No alarms were triggered. Nothing was stolen. Only 2 lives were ended. And 1 life, the one left behind in the guest house, shifted from quiet obscurity into the harshest spotlight imaginable. This isn't just a murder case. It's a betrayal wrapped in legacy. A private implosion playing out on a national stage. And what's most disturbing is how easy it is to believe it could have been avoided. Or could it? This is the story of Nick Reiner. Age 32. Writer, filmmaker, son, and now, alleged murderer. Charged with the stabbing deaths of his own parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner. Both found in their $13.5 million Brentwood home. Their daughter Romy reportedly the one who found them. The same daughter who allegedly whispered to officers, "There's only one person this could be. And he lives just down the driveway." The details are haunting. But here's the part that stops you cold. Nick says he had nothing to gain. He claims he wasn't even in the will. So why would someone murder the 2 people who gave him everything? Except, it seems, their trust? And is that all this is? A will? A financial dispute? A bruised ego turned fatal? Or is something deeper pulsing beneath this crime? A longer history of fear, silence, denial? That's what we're going to explore. And be warned, some of what we've uncovered isn't easy to look at. Not because it's gory or explicit, but because it's familiar. The idea of loving someone who might one day turn on you. The blind spots we allow when it's family. And the quiet erosion of trust that happens over years, not days. There were signs. Some say Michelle saw them. Others insist Rob was too forgiving. And then there's Romy, the younger sibling, the daughter, the witness. She may have known more than anyone. And she might have been the one person Nick warned in advance. So, let's pause for a second. How does a family that built its legacy on storytelling, on crafting worlds of connection, conflict, redemption, end up with this story as their final act? How does the son of one of America's most iconic filmmakers end up pacing a police interrogation room, asking, "Did Romy tell you I warned her?" How does a man become both victim and perpetrator in his own bloodline? And most of all, what was the real motive? Because if you believe Nick, it wasn't money. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was something more invisible. He says it was betrayal. That he was lied to. That he was never in the will. That his parents planned to erase him from their lives and their fortune. And maybe they did. But does that justify what he allegedly did next? Or is this just the story he's telling himself, to live with the one that already happened? We've spoken to sources close to the family. We've combed through leaked police notes, financial documents, and personal writings. We've reviewed surveillance footage, listened to court-released transcripts, and examined digital footprints that tell a far darker story than Nick may have intended. And while the trial hasn't begun yet, public opinion already has. Some see Nick as a troubled son, crying out for validation. Others see him as a calculating figure, hiding behind his family's fame. And a few, especially online, see him as the tragic product of privilege, addiction, and years of unresolved dysfunction. But one thing is clear. This case isn't just about what happened that night. It's about everything that happened before it, and everything that didn't. Let's go back, not just to the Brentwood estate on that Sunday night, but to the years leading up to it. To the quiet dinners that ended in silence. To the family vacations where one child stayed home. To the rehab centers, the emergency calls, the tense family meetings. Let's pull back the curtain on the Reiners. Not to smear their name, but to understand how a family can fall apart, and how the pieces don't always make a sound when they hit the floor. There's a quote from Rob Reiner that's been circulating since the news broke. It's from an old interview. He was talking about directing his father, Carl Reiner, in a scene where the older man plays a grieving widower. Rob said, "There's a line between fiction and pain. You have to cross it, but you have to come back. Now, maybe his own son crossed that line. But if he did, the way back doesn't exist. Because this story doesn't end with a tearful confession or a sweeping third-act redemption. Not yet, anyway. It ends with silence. 2 bodies, 1 arrest, and a will. A document that might explain everything. Or nothing at all. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. So what exactly was left out? Let me ask you something. If you knew you were being cut out of your own family's legacy, if you saw your name erased from the future your last name helped build, what would you do? Would you ask why? Would you fight? Would you walk away quietly? Or would something darker start to take root? That's where we begin, with a house. A house that, from the outside, looked like the American dream wrapped in ivy and California light. The Reiner estate in Brentwood. Appraised at $13.5 million. Private drive. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Immaculate landscaping. A place where every detail was curated. Except, it turns out, the future. Because for all its beauty, that house had a guest house. And inside that guest house, behind the stone path and sculpted hedges, lived Nick. 32 years old. Living alone. Less than 100 feet from the family that now, according to police reports, he may have killed. Let that sink in. Nick wasn't estranged. He wasn't living across the country or sleeping on a friend's couch. He was right there. Every day, just down the hill from his parents' bedroom window. And yet, according to everything we've found, he may have felt completely excluded from their lives. Especially the part that came after. The will. And not just any will. A document that, according to family insiders, had been updated just a few months before the murders. A document that allegedly removed Nick entirely from his share of the estate. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because most of us want to believe that love in a family is unconditional. That even when things are strained, even when there's rehab, arguments, years of damage, that a parent wouldn't delete their child from their will. But that's exactly what Michelle and Rob may have done. And if the reports are true, they didn't even tell him. According to one source close to the Reiner's legal team, who spoke on background, Nick had been left out of the primary inheritance. Instead, the bulk of the estate was to pass to Romy, and to a private charitable trust connected to Michelle's work in children's education. Not a dime, they claim, was directly allocated to Nick. Now, pause. Before we go any further, ask yourself, is that motive? Is being left out of a will enough to do what Nick allegedly did? Maybe, maybe not. But here's where it twists again. Because in the days leading up to the murders, Nick apparently believed the opposite. He thought the will included him. At least, that's what he said. In conversations with a former friend, who has since turned over their messages to police, Nick allegedly claimed, they changed it back. I'm good. Just had to be patient. So either he was lied to, or he lied to himself. Which one is worse? Because if he truly believed he was in the will, if he thought things were turning around, then the murders weren't a reaction. They were something else entirely. Premeditated, deliberate, detached. And if he knew he wasn't in the will, then it's hard not to look at what happened next as punishment. Or maybe a final, desperate rewrite of the story. But that depends on how far back you want to go. Because this wasn't just a sudden rift. Nick and his parents, particularly Rob, had a long, complex history. One that's been kept out of the public eye, until now. Let's rewind. Nick Reiner grew up in privilege. There's no way to sugarcoat that. He attended elite schools, had early access to the entertainment world, and co-wrote a semi-autobiographical film in his 20s about addiction and family dysfunction. A film, mind you, that Rob helped produce. That alone tells you something. At some point, they were trying. At some point, there was connection. But as one family friend told us, trying with Nick always came at a cost. They didn't elaborate. They didn't have to. Because court records and rehab filings, some of them public, some quietly surfaced, paint the outline of a young man who struggled for years. Substance abuse, legal disputes, a protective order that was later withdrawn. There were relapses. There were outbursts. And in the middle of it all, parents trying to navigate love and fear at the same time. Imagine that. Imagine locking your bedroom door at night, not because of a stranger, but because you're afraid your child might snap. Now add to that a $13.5 million estate, an inheritance large enough to breed expectation, resentment, and calculation. Michelle, according to one source, had become increasingly uncomfortable with Nick's presence on the property. She allegedly pushed for him to move into transitional housing. But Rob resisted. "He's our son," he reportedly said in an email exchange that investigators are now reviewing. They were at odds. One parent trying to protect, the other trying to hold on. And caught in the middle, Romy. She visited often, sometimes stayed the night. And, according to her own brief statement to police, she was worried. "Something's going to happen," she allegedly said just days before the incident. "He's spiraling. He's not okay." And yet, no restraining order. No formal action. Just warnings. Whispers. Hesitations. So when the murders happened, brutal, intimate, controlled, investigators zeroed in fast. Because the suspect didn't come from the outside. He came from the guest house. He came from family. And the will. Well, that may have been the match. But it wasn't the only thing burning. Let's talk about that guest house. A few hundred feet down from the main residence, tucked beneath a stretch of ornamental sycamores and soundproofed from the bustle of the city. It was more than just a space. It was a statement. See, it wasn't small. It had its own driveway, private entrance, home theater, marble countertop kitchenette, a second-floor loft that overlooked a koi pond Michelle had designed herself. It looked like a luxury retreat. But over time, it became something else. A buffer, a holding cell, a boundary with a beautiful finish. Because Michelle, by many accounts, had stopped visiting it. And Romy? She avoided it completely. It's important we don't paint this with broad strokes. Nick wasn't a cartoon villain hiding in the shadows. He was part of this family. He showed up at birthdays. He helped Rob organize a small film fundraiser just last year. He posted smiling selfies with Michelle during Mother's Day. And yet, there was distance. The kind you can feel even when someone's in the next room. Now here's where things get murky. Police records, while redacted in parts, include something subtle. An officer's note from a welfare check nearly 3 months before the murders. It reads, "Michelle concerned Nick's mood plus odd behavior after mention of inheritance shift. Refused removal. Said, he just needs more time." That was March. The murders occurred in July. For months. That's how long Michelle lived with that fear, or denial, depending on how you see it. But here's the more chilling part. After their deaths, when detectives began cataloging the house for inventory, they noticed something unusual. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No disabled security system. But one thing stood out. In the guest house, inside Nick's private office, was a binder. Unmarked. Simple. Black leather. Inside it, handwritten notes. Some were lists of film ideas. Others appeared to be pieces of dialogue. But near the back was something different. A single sheet. Folded neatly. It read, "If you erase me, I erase you. Fair's fair." It wasn't signed. It wasn't dated. But it wasn't fiction either. That page was turned over to investigators. Its ink, paper stock, and fingerprint trace are all reportedly part of the current evidentiary file. Now, let's return to the question. Was Nick really excluded from the will? Or did he just think he was? According to estate attorneys familiar with California probate law, it's entirely possible that Nick was written out, but not legally disinherited. There's a difference. Under state law, unless specifically disinherited in writing, a child may still have a claim, especially in cases where the estate is worth millions and ambiguous language is used. And here's where it gets even trickier. Some sources say that while Nick may not have been listed for direct inheritance, he was named as a potential recipient of the Brentwood guest house, pending a behavior clause. Let that sink in. A behavior clause. Meaning, if he stayed clean, stable, and avoided legal trouble for a defined period, he would receive the property. According to one lawyer, this type of clause isn't unheard of when dealing with an heir who has a history of substance issues or volatility. It's a way to balance love and caution. But for Nick, that might have felt like judgment disguised as generosity. Conditional love, one source said. He hated that term. Said it all the time. Now think about that in contrast with Romy.